Hello, I'm Father Kenneth Metz, a priest here at All Souls Catholic Church in Sanford, Florida. A few weeks ago, someone asked me why the Catholic Church changed its teaching on the death penalty. I immediately thought there was more than one question wrapped up in the question I was asked, like, well, how could the Catholic Church change the position on any moral question? And what is wrong with the death penalty, especially here in Florida, as well as more recently in the federal justice system? In this video, we'll look back over the tradition of the Catholic Church regarding the use of capital punishment. In a second video, we will examine in some detail the teachings of Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis with an eye for the changes they made in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And I want to give you the basis for their adjustments. Well, to begin, the bases for the Catholic Church's moral positions are found in its biblically grounded convictions about good and evil, sin and redemption, justice and mercy. Through the centuries, the understanding of these concepts has grown and has developed. The starting point, though, is found in the book of Genesis, where we read that every human life is precious to God. In the sacred scriptures, we learn that we human beings are made in the image and likeness of God, and we also learn that we are redeemed by Jesus Christ. Respect for human beings is not something earned by acting justly or lost through malicious behavior. It just is. In the Old Testament, we find the Mosaic law prescribed execution for at least 36 offenses. These laws were based on the lex talionis, or the law of retaliation. The civil laws of Israel, like those of nations neighboring Israel, prescribed law with judgment to follow. In the early covenant of works, there was little mercy, so it's mostly justice. For example, in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, we read only of justice and not of mercy. In many places in the Mosaic covenant, mercy is evident, but not when it comes to the lex talionis. As Moses wrote in Deuteronomy 19:21, show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. The Old Testament lex talionis don't make sense because it's in the context that's very much like that of all the other nations. The Hebrew laws were similar to those of other nations. The Code of Hammurabi came before the writing of the Torah, and the 12 copper tablets of Rome came later. They both promulgated the lex talionis. Some interpreters interpret and identify certain New Testament texts as supporting the use of capital punishment, as when Jesus referred to the Mosaic teaching that, quote, he who speaks evil of father or mother, let him surely die. It's in Matthew 5 and Mark 7. Likewise, the fact that the good thief crucified along Jesus acknowledged the justice of his own death, that's been used as and has been claimed as an argument favoring the death penalty by Christians. It's in Luke chapter 23. The author of the letter to the Hebrews attests that those who reject the Torah should be executed, quote, without pity. Hebrews 10:28. Attentive to moral prescriptions, though, in Scripture and the example of Christ, Christian authors in the first 4 centuries by and large confirmed the right and sometimes the duty of civil authorities to impose the death penalty for certain crimes. Had not St. Paul, in chapter 13 of his letter to the Romans, understood that the magistrate bears the sword for a divine purpose? Are they not ministers of God? But absent the prerogatives of the state to exact punishment for infractions against civil peace, society would have descended into chaos. But while many of the church fathers acknowledged the need to use force in shoring up the defenses against injustice, there was also resistance to allowing Christian believers to participate in state-sanctioned violence. Even in cases where the offense was grave, eminent fathers of the church like Tertullian and Origen manifested a clear preference for mercy and an aversion to all punishment that involved the shedding of blood. Following the Edict of Milan by Constantine in 313 and the rise of the Christian state, Christian authorities adopted a near unanimous support for capital punishment in special, limited circumstances. St. Augustine, for example, asserted that participation in war or in the legal execution of criminals in no way goes against the commandment, "You shall not kill." Yet that same famous church leader also maintained the necessity of purity of motive when carrying out a capital punishment. Acting as judge or executioner requires an interior disposition of remorse for having to take the life of a human being, never for vengeance. And similarly, centuries later, Pope Innocent III, who lived at the turn of the 12th to the 13th century, he sanctioned capital punishment so long as it was carried out with justice and not out of hatred, with prudence and not with haste. In an exercise of the Church's solemn teaching authority, the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 promulgated that, quote, "No cleric may decree or pronounce a sentence involving the shedding of blood or carry out a punishment involving the same, or to be present when such punishment is carried out," close quote. While deepening alliances between the ecclesiastical and civil realms led the Church to accept the participation of Christians in the process of executing criminals, popes and other bishops refused to permit the clergy and the monks from being directly involved in such activity. Drawing on sacred scripture, St. Thomas Aquinas argued that ecclesiastical courts and the state should refrain from using the death penalty except for very grave offenses such as murder and treason. Now, over the years, as discoveries of ancient texts influenced our understanding of the Lex Talionis, insights were discovered which challenged our long-standing belief. A deeper reading of these scriptures indicate that the principal intent of the Mosaic statutes was to limit the retribution that could be exacted for an offense, not to require a minimum punishment. Particular commands like the one found in Genesis 9:6, "If anyone sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed," were seen to have a poetic character that indicated an original purpose that was not legal in intent. Such verses contained a pedagogical, a teaching purpose, removed from the sphere of literal legal applications. In addition to these newer appreciation of the texts themselves, it's a fundamental Catholic principle to read individual passages of Scripture in the context of the whole Bible. While the Old and New Testaments admittedly included passages that command taking the life of one who kills, the Jewish Scriptures and the teachings of Jesus as a whole esteem the protection of human life, the practice of mercy, and the rejection of vengeance. I think it's helpful in this regard to recall that when Cain killed his brother Abel, God did not end Cain's life. Instead, he sent the murderer brother into exile, not only sparing his life, but protecting him by putting, quote, "a mark of Cain, lest anyone should kill him at sight." Recall also that when faced with an execution of a public sinner, Jesus exposed the network of evil that underlined the adulterous actions of the woman who faced death by stoning. Besides this, there's a question as to whether the Lex Talionis was ever applied across the board. It apparently was not. Now, in my next video, I will show you how this approach of the Catholic Church changed on this issue since the 90s. In the meantime, visit our website at www.allsoulsanford.org, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day.